guys, and welcome to Pharmacist Diaries, the podcast that reveals the secret lives of pharmacists, from where their journeys began, where they are now, and everything in between. Before we start today's conversation, I'd really like to take the time to say thanks. A thank you to all of you who have chosen to listen or watch the podcast, but also a thank you to all of my guests who have chosen to dive deep into conversation with me and share their professional and personal journeys. You guys have enabled me to embed creativity into my day-to-day life, and I'm so fortunate that I can share that joy and passion with you through this platform. This podcast has been a passion project of mine outside of my role as a full-time pharmacist, a mother and a wife. Everything you see and hear has been built in my spare time. In order for this platform to grow and provide you with insight into the lives of pharmacists, I really need you to hit that subscribe button. I am super excited for what's in store for 2023, and a lot of that will depend on the number of you that subscribe to the channel and tune in to regular conversations. Thanks again for all the support, and I'm really looking forward to the development of this podcast and our pharmacy community. Don't forget, my website is now live and up and running. You can access full show notes to all of my episodes and more at www.pharmacistdiaries.com. Make sure you subscribe to my newsletter so you can receive emails of upcoming episodes, free content, and regular inspiration. Now let's see what's in store for this week's episode. So welcome to Pharmacist Diaries. God, I've been excited the whole day, actually, because I am just really looking forward, to hearing the story, but I'm really looking forward to hearing about Emma-Jean & Co. and how it got developed. And though I've listened to a podcast episode where I've kind of gotten to know you a little bit, using Tim's podcast, Your Financial Pharmacist, that I love so much, I'm just really excited to hear it from you and get the next part of the journey, because he stopped at the point where you were still I think you were doing things from home at that time, and I think you only had 2 employees. So obviously things have really progressed.
They have.
So it's kind of like part 2 of Tim's podcast, really. So I usually kickstart my episodes by asking you why you became a pharmacist in the first place.
Perfect. Well, Nisha, thank you for having me. I'm honored,
absolutely.
and I was excited too. I feel so honored to connect with you in different time zones and cross the pond. So why did I become a pharmacist? I graduated from an undergrad degree undergrad program with a BS in psychology. And by the time I finished your other classes along the way, I ended up with minors in biology and chemistry. And I originally always wanted to go to vet school. I rode horses competitively growing up. It was a really big part of my life growing up as a child. And I wanted to be an equine leg surgeon. And what I basically, when I was getting closer to college, I went and shadowed a female equine vet at a vet school close to my home. And it was eye-opening, but she also really explained to me not to choose the career path that I wanted. And it really blew my mind that she would steer me away from what she had chosen. But I am so grateful to her for that, because ultimately what I loved about riding horses competitively and that lifestyle is what drew me to want to be a vet. And I would be in school, I think it was a total of 17 years. And when the economy changes, people tend to really have to focus on their own health rather than their animals, unfortunately. And she said, I really want you to consider that what you love about horses and things like that might really make you not enjoy this career down the line with the amount of time and effort it goes into it, with the niche that I was wanting to look at. So I kind of left that opportunity with her and was really down, and depressed. And I started to think, what are other things that I would want to look at for a career path, which is really tough in college, that we are expected to make these huge decisions for the rest of our life when we're, not even 21 years old. And chemistry is something that I love, and it comes easy to me. And I'm fascinated by molecules and the way they work. And so I started to just really sit with myself and decide what are other career paths that involve that. And pharmacy at this point in time, which was in, 2003 is when I graduated undergrad. Pharmacy was a very different career than it is today in terms of market saturation, offerability with anything from salaries, but also the opportunities out there. And all I knew about pharmacy was hospital and retail. And as I started to look a little deeper into the career and see that it's a wonderful career path for women, it's a wonderful career path for mothers. I felt like there was a balance that you can achieve in a pharmacy career from what I had seen of being able to be a mom, a wife, and also my individual person. And that was very important to me as I wanted to choose a career. So the more I looked into the chemistry that's involved with pharmacy, which is the kind of the bread and butter of a pharmacy career path, I was like, I really want to look deeper into this. I want to see what are the opportunities there. So the deeper I went, the more I fell in love with it, and specifically a clinical picture of pharmacy. And so I chose that over something like medical school because of that balance. That was really important to me, to be able to be a wife one day and a mother, and to have an individual kind of life that I wanted to lead separate from my career.
Yeah, I mean, things are quite similar here in terms of why a lot of women go into pharmacy. And one of the main reasons why I chose it, exactly the same reasons: the flexibility, the options, the variety, knowing that we can be independent as professionals, but also work part-time when we become parents, or choose to work what we call as locum pharmacists. But you in the US, what do you call it again?
Like floaters.
Floaters, yeah.
Floaters, yeah.
But you've got that option, for example, in retail if you want to. Here, like, hospital jobs are really good at creating part-time opportunities for parents, like especially for mums. We are really good at having that flexibility of part-time jobs or job sharing. So you'd have a full-time post, but you just share it with one other person. So maybe 2.5 days each, or 3 days and 2 days with the kind of hospital roles, which are really useful. So yeah, we do have a lot of opportunity, and it's, even now, like as a parent, I feel like it has provided me everything that I expected it to and more. I'm a pharmacist now for 11, 12 years. You've been a little bit longer. The roles have grown significantly, and there's even more option than there was when we graduated and thought like retail, hospital, or even going into industry and working for big like pharma companies. Those were kind of the main options. So it's really interesting also how you loved chemistry. Organic chemistry was like my jam when I was in university.
Loved
I
it.
was so good at it. And I haven't utilized it to the extent that I wish actually that um I could have, because my roles don't necessarily need to utilize those skills, but you must be using that all the time now, as part of like your new role in pharmacy.
Yeah, it's so crazy when I think to kind of those undergrad classes that lead you up to your pharmacy, doctorate program.
Yeah.
Organic chemistry was my jam too. And then when I went further into pharmacy school, medicinal chemistry, I could not get enough of it. Now, biochem, no, I was,
Yeah.
it was tougher for me to really grasp, but that medicinal chemistry is where I really just loved it. And it's very interesting as we go deeper into the story. Pharmaceutics was my least favorite class. And now I do so much pharmaceutics with, product development and manufacturing per se, more of that compounding role, that it's so interesting how the tables turn.
But isn't that one of the joys of being in this profession,
So
is
much
that
so.
of course you get the variety in the role, but within the role itself, the amount of skill and the variety and skill that you need to use. So you've got your chemistry knowledge, you've got your pharmaceutics, you've got your sterile compounding, you've got to think about the consumer who's going to be using your product, obviously, and how that impacts them. So you're thinking about marketing and, sales and business and finances, and it's just a little bit of everything all rolled into one.
It is every possible hat. Like, for instance, today, as we record this, I came in, I had the flexibility and freedom to take my daughter to her 5-year-old doctor's appointment before she goes into kindergarten, which is a new freedom as a company that I've created. And we can talk about that further, but I had that freedom. And then I got here, and a couple of my employees were here going ahead and setting up for the day. And I have, since being here, done everything from sterile compound, shipping, manufacturing, sweeping, gardening and pulling herbs that we use in some of our body products, drying herbs, marketing advertising call, stamping bags. I mean, you wear so many hats, not only in pharmacy, and then you wear so many hats in entrepreneurship. And I think it's really important, if you have any listeners that are finding themselves in an entrepreneur kind of role or path, that their ultimate backbone of what got them there is pharmacy, similar as mine, is that there's a lot of overlap that comes with the discipline and the dedication it takes to be in the pharmaceutical industry, whether that's pharma, clinical, hospital role, nuclear, retail. It doesn't matter. To be in the pharmaceutical kind of career path, it takes a lot of grit, determination, dedication, and very specific self-discipline. And that very much rolls over into this entrepreneurship role, or kind of world that I found myself in.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm going to take you back to when you were in the later stages of pharmacy school, and kind of what I guess drove you in terms of passion for your first job as a pharmacist.
Oh, wow. I love this. I haven't thought about this in so long. Well, I guess it starts with, I am 41 now, and I can look back at this. Are you familiar with the Enneagram?
I've heard of it. Remind
The
me.
Enneagram is kind of a personality test that allows us to see kind of how we're programmed, how we're wired as people. And I was just introduced to the Enneagram 3 years ago. My sister is a therapist. Thank God for her. And she uses Enneagram with her clients. And she introduced this to me. And the reason I bring it up is that based off what my Enneagram number, or the wiring that I found through that, really, I can look back in time and see all of these pieces put into place that make sense as to what drove me and what my passion is. So to understand that, it's important to understand that me as a person, I am driven by achievement equals a personal worth. Everybody has different things that make them feel worthy, that are their strengths, but also that make them kind of have that drive. And for me, it's achievement. So usually you see achievers, which is called the Enneagram 3. You see them in a lot of COO, CEO roles, very much leadership kind of opportunities. And I do think it's important to note that anyone that has that achieving capability in them, you will find them in these higher program, or, postdoctoral or postgraduate programs, like a doctoral program. So as I am in pharmacy school, I think now I look back and I'm like, oh, that makes complete sense as to why I had that drive and I kept going. But my undergrad program, I went to a private liberal arts college. I didn't go to a large state university. And I was always a straight A student in high school. It's part of that kind of achievement worth, kind of yin and yang. And I did not have to try that hard in high school. And then you go into college, and it was a liberal arts college, and everything was very, very intense. Even organic chemistry, as we were saying, like, I remember my exams were written full written paragraph and essay exams. There was never multiple choice in my 4-year undergrad degree. So it really honed a little bit more of that discipline and that achieving kind of mentality. So then as I got into pharmacy school, and you're thrown all of these different, classes and new learning opportunities and really stretching your brain, I think that there's a piece of me that is just pre-programmed as a person to have that achievement a part of my day-to-day life. So that's worth speaking about, But then when I started to look into, pharmacy school and what drove me and my passion, I think towards the ends, it's just finishing the program because it's very tough, especially if you come in with an undergrad degree. You've been in school a long time. You know that you can see the horizon. That's a very important kind of milestone to hit versus your first year entering. You've learned how to manage and really balance a lot of the stress and the just open-ended, never-ending learning that comes your way. I mean, every year that someone exits and finishes a pharmacy program, the next student that's entering it, what is it? In the United States, it's about, a little bit, maybe 100, 150 new drugs coming on the market every year. And you are required to learn everything from kinetics to the mechanism of action to the everything about this drug you have to know. And there's just so much bandwidth, I think, that our brains can tolerate before we really kind of short circuit and need to find a better balance. And so I think towards the end of school, a lot of that drive was really finishing the program and getting out to apply that knowledge and be able to start to figure out how to balance my life with this career path. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And also linking it to kind of direct patient care. You spend so much time, and obviously there are sort of like placements, and you're going into hospitals to visit and kind of work short term during your pharmacy school times, but when you qualify, those patients are yours.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference between the kind of background knowledge that you gain as a student and then implementing that into practice and solving problems for real life humans. And there's so much enjoyable skill that comes out of that, from communication to being organized, prioritizing which patients you might see first if you're doing ward rounds and things like that in a hospital environment. And like the learning curve is huge. It's incredible. I mean, but it's fascinating as a human, and for people like us who are sort of achievers, and pharmacists end up being in that kind of type A personality where it's just boom, boom, boom. Like it's from one step to the next, and you're kind of expected. You have to get on with it. You have to find a way to be organized and manage your time and take from one level to the next, because you'll never make it otherwise.
No,
and then you become a machine in your job, don't you?
You do. And it's so important that what you outline about, once you own these patients, they are yours. And, there is very much that learning curve. And I think in that learning curve from school to actual practitioner, a licensed pharmacist responsible for the care of these people, the confidence that has to come with that. And it is not an overnight game. It is very gradual of the confidence that you learn. And I think that's where your last year in pharmacy school, really the priority is to gain that confidence of application from all of this knowledge base to the actual breathing, living human being. But in I would say my first job out of school, it was really important to me when I look back to my actual pharmacy experience, because my first job was at a very large hospital. It's around, now it's larger, but it was 880 beds. And at this point, you're a brand new pharmacist, you're scared to death. You're going to code patients, and wanting to know that you're going to make the right decisions and all of your clinical kind of whatever clinical picture the patient has. And for me, my first job is where I got two pieces of experience and training that ended up kind of laying the foundation for the rest of my career as a full-time pharmacist, which was in orthopedics and neurosciences, neurology. And it's really interesting because my personal history, my grandfather is a retired neurosurgeon. And neurology and neurosciences is a very niche kind of part of pharmacy that there's not a ton of experience in. That usually falls under that, umbrella of critical care. And for me, it was wild to see that my interest started to really focus in this neurology world. And from there, at my first job is where I got so much training for neurocritical care patients, which then took me to my next job, which is where I currently am in Nashville. And now I just see patients part-time. And I was the neuro specialist at my current hospital for 10 years before I chose to kind of step into some admin roles and then ultimately part-time as I grew a company. And I think it's really important that piece of application and also this bandwidth that you get out of school and you're like, whew, okay, I don't have to do those tests now, but the confidence that you have to gain as you know that you are looking at a breathing human being and you're wanting to give them the ultimate best care that you can and make the best decisions for their health. That confidence that happens kind of in the background as you continue to learn is really important. And that is where I see now looking back, their neuroscience world is where I gained that confidence. And then it opened up this part of me that I would have never seen coming until I look back at kind of my family history of there's a lot of neurology focus in my mom's side of the family. I love it. Just loved it. I thrived on it. And I think that you have to have that passion that comes along with the confidence as it's growing to make you a great practitioner so you don't become that machine. Because healthcare professionals, this is my opinion, no matter what kind of niche you're in, whether it's nursing, physical therapy, physicians, pharmacy, whatever, it's a very hard profession because you are choosing to be a nurturer and a giver to other people. That is what you've chosen to do. You are improving their life and you're a giver. And to be a giver all day long is a wonderful thing, but ultimately we have to have things for ourselves as well. And to be giving all day long, it's easy, especially this day and age with everything we've gone through in the past 3 years or so, it's easy to become that machine and then to lose that passion and that nurturing ability that we're human beings, we burn out, So I think that along that path of the confidence that's building in the background and really starting to focus in areas that fill you up and you find so fascinating, it's important for that to be a part of the story as a pharmacist as you continue your career path. Because once you lose that, you become a machine. And then, your career that you've chosen is no different than, anyone else's.
Absolutely. I mean, every pharmacist who goes into a patient-facing role wants to help people. Like, that's their number one goal as to why they choose that job.
Mm-hmm.
And day in, day out, we're trained to help people. But sometimes we lose focus on ourselves, like you say, because the expectations from the employer can be huge. You can have a pandemic, for example, who changes everything, and you become an absolute machine because you need to support society and do what's right for the nation and for the people around you and your community, which we all would step up and happily do that with pride. But then I think people forget about themselves sometimes, and that element of self-care and reflection on why they chose to do the job, it hides. And you hear a lot of pharmacists now burning out and finding it really challenging within the pharmacy job. And once you kind of step into that cycle of just constantly, you wake up, you go to work, you come home late, some people are working in the evenings from home, you go to sleep, you do it all over again. You don't necessarily look after yourself, and you just become attuned to this type of life. You're kind of living to work, it's becoming more common these days, and people are losing sight of that dream as to why they chose that specialty area, or why they wanted to work so desperately in that hospital, or, what element of the job that they loved. And I talk about this a lot on the podcast because part of having this podcast and using this platform is to showcase what we are capable of, because I think in pharmacy, we don't do enough of that in general. We don't showcase our profession as much as we should, especially in the UK. But also it highlights all the good things that we are capable of, and that we have so many skills and abilities that it's useful to share this for the younger generation of pharmacists, to hear people's stories and how they've overcome some of these challenges or obstacles that have come our way during the years that we've been a pharmacist. And I've learned so many incredible journeys from people who have kind of gone through that cycle of overwhelm and then taking a step back to really think about, what is it that I love about this job, and what can I change to kind of reinstate that fire in me? And is that something that you've kind of experienced personally? Because you've been in neurosciences obviously for a decade and you love it and you're still doing it. But was there an element of maybe not feeling as passionate in that specialty and then looking for other things within pharmacy in terms of variety, which also obviously suited your lifestyle as a wife and a mother? Let's not forget that, because we know that always plays a part. But is there a link there?
Absolutely. It's a very interesting and easy segue, that question, into kind of the next season of my life that came after being a neurospecialist for 10 years. So that achieving piece of me, again, is so important to really understand. Not only that, but also what you said about burnout. I think it's very, very important for anyone listening to your podcast, or pharmacists in general. When I was taking residents and taking students, I made sure that they understood that not only were we grinding and learning and stuffing things into their brain, but for them to understand you will experience burnout more than once. And I need you to understand that this will come. And I need you to, the reason I want them to understand that this will come is so they're not discouraged the first time that they go through burnout. Because burnout is just part of the game. When you give, and you're a nurturer by design to choose to be a healthcare professional in whatever capacity, you will burn out. And more times than not, you'll burn out more than once. And it's really important to recognize it when you're there, to know that you have to pull back and define what we all call balance. But it's really making choices that could be anything from boundaries for, anything with your work life, like overtime or extra shifts or things like that, because you're giving your all, when you're in your job. But also finding whatever makes you tick and gives you the highest quality of life outside of work. That is a very important thing for a healthcare professional and a pharmacist to understand. So for me, I was in this neurocritical care specialist role. I had forged some really wonderful, important relationships with the neurocritical care specialist, our neurosurgeons, our neurointensivist, our interventionalists, like really the entire program as it grew in my current hospital in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a very large hospital. And as I had forged these relationships, and I love connecting with people, and it was a really important part of that job, that specialist position. And what's crazy is that everyone doesn't really understand that. And there's so many neurologists that would agree with me that a neuro patient, there's just so much you can do for them as the brain has to heal itself. It's a very different kind of organ to focus on than the heart or the kidneys or anything like that. For the brain, there's a finite amount of things that you can do while that brain has to do its own healing. And so within whatever neurology patient is experiencing, that in my case, it was hemorrhagic stroke, ischemic stroke, status epilepticus patients, a lot of pituitary tumor patients. There's just so much we can do for them. And then their brain has to kind of heal itself. So I feel like I had done a lot of work in that area, whether that's formulary development, that was these relationships to help bring light to the programs and creating everything they needed to support their programs. A clinical picture as a neurology pharmacist is just making sure that those physicians and surgeons knew that I could take over their patients with dosing of anything they needed. And then the extra kind of cherries on top are the resident training, your students you're taking. I felt at the time I had reached that pinnacle, and I had done this, and I was very good at this, and it was a routine for me. I knew what I was doing. And the next kind of piece for me, as I took inventory on where do I want to go next, because that's just how I'm programmed, is more of an administration role. And I waited until I was ready. I had a couple of directors of pharmacy at some sister hospitals that happened to be residents under me years before, ask if I would come be their clinical manager. And I was like, the time's not right. I knew to really trust when it felt right. And then I became a mother. And through that, becoming a mom and learning a brand new job, right? You understand, because you're a mother, learning a brand new job, and your heart expands into a focus that you would not have known before until you become a mom. My focus really became, how can I find that balance now for my daughter and my relationship with her, and for my husband? And then I knew the time was right, because personally for me, I needed more flexibility in my schedule in the mornings to see her, because that's the other piece of this, is it's a sacrifice. In my experience, to be a hospital pharmacist in a specialist role, I was leaving my house 45 minutes ahead of time to get to work by 6:30 in the morning to prepare for rounds, to round on patients. And then you're taking care of critically sick people all day. And then you're stuck in traffic to come home. And that can feel like that mechanistic cogwheel type of life. And I knew that is not how I'm programmed, that I was not living life to its fullest. And then you introduce a child into that, and you really want to refocus, your priorities. So there was an opportunity for me to step into a clinical manager role in a pharmacy administration position. And I did. And I did that for close to 3 years. And that is when I developed my company while I happened to be in that role. And that transition was really interesting, because as someone is a pharmacist, and as they are this achieving mentality, and they have learned very high functioning knowledge base and how to make decisions, very good solution finders and decision making capabilities. In my mind, I was like, I'll learn this in 6 months and I'll be a well-oiled machine. It took a full year, honestly, to learn, because it's really important, I think, for pharmacists in an admin role to have been what I call a worker bee, been the operations, been in the clinical picture within a hospital system before they step into an administration role, so they know the decisions they're making, how those impact their actual staff. And I had 10 years of that. So that was important, but also I thought that would have come a little faster than it did in understanding my new role. But that was a time, it was just patience and time to learn a very different set of decision-making tools, and the decisions you make for your department now, and how you see those affecting your entire facility in a hospital system. So I did that for about 3 years. And so it was a transition that was really interesting. But what ultimately that did is it allowed me to have that balance in my life I needed for my daughter and my husband. But what's wild is, now looking back, is I see all of the building blocks and all the domino effect of how each one of these steps led me to where I am now, which is the happiest I've ever been, which is using a completely new set of skills, but also learning this very non-traditional, or using this non-traditional experience of the chemistry, the sterile compounding, the pharmaceutics, the decision making, the formulary management with my inventory. It all came full circle into fruition now. And I owe it all to pharmacy, because I would have never been able to organize something like this without having that entire career choice as my backbone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things kind of come to mind. When you made that transition from neurosciences to an administration role, did you have like work guilt similar to mum guilt that you were leaving that specialty? And I know that obviously you're working in that area part-time at the moment, but did you feel guilty leaving it from 5 days a week? And the only reason why I ask is because like we've discussed, that when you become a pharmacist, you're like this, well-oiled machine to drive forward within, I guess, the specialty area that you've chosen. So you've spent an entire decade in one area, and then you feel like you need to be loyal to that area of expertise. And when you try something else, did you feel guilty leaving that specialty?
100%.
Yeah.
It was twofold. It was, number one, leaving the hospital I had been at for 10 years.
Yeah.
Not only the staff, those physicians I had worked tirelessly. Neurology is a very interesting discipline with the people that choose that. You have to really put in the time to build those relationships with neurologists.
Yeah, definitely.
And I felt guilty to leave that and the hard work that it took to get there. I felt guilty leaving our pharmacy program because I was the only one who had worked for 10 years to get that kind of up and running. But it's interesting because as I started into this admin role at a new hospital, the first programs that I focused on, or the first pharmacy kind of solutions and opportunities for problem solving, I went straight to the neurology focus, I was like, I know how to do this. And I think it took me about 3 months to really understand that now I had taken the responsibility to look at something as the whole and to start to focus in other areas that might not have been, more of my strong suit, such as pediatrics, oncology, things like that. But absolutely, I think it comes with a personality type and being loyal, but also respectful of the career path that you chose and the time, respectful of the time that you put into that.
I know.
You remember every conversation, every late night that you stayed at the hospital, every formulary, document that you spent tirelessly making. And I think with that, the respect that you have for your own time and knowledge, as well as other people's times and time and knowledge, comes into play for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it has been such a hard transition to become a parent, because your whole life turns upside down. And if you are an achiever, and you've got that kind of type A personality to drive your career forward, and that is a huge part of your life, especially as a pharmacist. You work so hard to get where you are. You do a few years, obviously, working, and you're still kind of in that growth mindset in terms of your career. I mean, for you, you will have been 5, 6 years into your job, and you obviously got pregnant, had a baby, but that's still so early on in the career that you still have so much more that you want to achieve within that time.
Mm.
And it's trying to drive forward your parenting skills. Like you said, it's a completely new job, and learn. And you have to learn at such a fast pace, and everything changes like every week or every day, because the baby grows with you and all of their developmental stages change, what they're capable of, how much independence they have, like the walking skills, the eating, breastfeeding, everything is constantly changing. But at the same time, you're grinding at work. And obviously in the US, you get really relatively short maternity leave as well. So when I had Liliana, I had 6 weeks. And it just felt like I was grinding at the moment she was born, going back to work and trying to be the best at both of those jobs. And we've moved back to the UK from living in Dubai and Abu Dhabi because obviously we missed family as well. I felt a lot of guilt that Liliana wouldn't have spent much time with my parents, and even my grandparents were alive, so her great grandparents. My husband's family's in London, and we just felt a little bit alone. And we felt a little bit guilty that she wouldn't have that connection because we both grew up with extended family members, cousins, aunties, uncles around us. And it was a huge part of both of our lives to have spent so much time with family. And for me, I spent most of my childhood with my grandparents. So I kind of felt bad that she would see them once or twice a year, which is very normal for a lot of people, but not necessarily for us. So we moved home also with the hopes that the support from family would then give us a little bit more flexibility to kind of do, follow career passions, etc. And I've come home and kind of transitioned into pediatrics, which is a new specialty area for me. I'm in palliative care, which is obviously quite challenging as a parent, but I do love it. I'm also lecturing at a university, which is relatively new for me. It's, been 3 years or so. And I do a lot of formulary management, which I love. So I'm split into lots of different directions, and I'm also a parent and about to be a parent of another child. So it's interesting to see like your journey, and it's interesting to see that there is someone else who also feels that element of guilt that when you make those changes in your career pathway, it's really hard emotionally. Like for me, I'm going into a second pregnancy. I'm very fortunate to have a much longer maternity this time, but I'm also quite anxious about how I'm going to feel as a parent of two, because I feel like Liliana has missed out on me as a mother. She went to full-time daycare from the age of 6 weeks. We've only really spent like holidays together when I've taken annual leave, like so vacations, which we don't get that much of. I mean, in a whole year, she's literally every day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the daycare, while I work and kind of earn money to pay for her to go there. And then, now she's started school because school starts at the age of 4 here, so a little bit earlier than US. But by the time I get home from work, I literally read her stories, kind of give her a quick like bath or shower, and she's off to bed. So we get 1 hour together a day, if that. And during the height of the pandemic, we were doing all sorts of shifts. So when she was 2, I would see her twice a week because I'd come home at that age. She was going to bed at like 6. So by the time I get home, she's already asleep, and I'd be out the door in the morning before she wakes up. And I've had a lot of guilt over the years. I've kind of missed out on a lot of the bonding experiences that a mum should have, and the flexibility in that kind of like work-life balance. And then having a second child, which is going to be wonderful. It's like, how do we make that work for us as a family? It does give me a little bit of anxiety because I want to be the best version of me in my career, but I also really, really, really want to be the best version of me as a mum. It's so hard.
Oh, you are saying so many things that I feel so deep in my bones right now. It's interesting because, gosh, for the sake of time, I could talk about this for hours. 2 things that I think are really important from my perspective is I think this day and age compared to, I mean, I'm 41, I'm not 23, but I think that kids now are learning a very progressive way at looking at their life and looking at the quality of life and making choices much earlier than maybe we did of what serves them best. Now, I know, when I look at maybe my parents' age, I'm very close to my parents, but my parents' age or older, and they did not have the choices that might be choices for kids these days.
Yeah.
Basically, as you're choosing careers, and finding creative ways to make things work for your lifestyle. I sympathize with you and empathize so much over the guilt. And I think the reason that you might experience that, I know the reason I experience that is because we're empaths, and also we're women, but we're empaths, and we have a built-in wiring when we become mothers to the empath kind of goes on steroids, right? And we want to be everything for everyone, but there's one of us. And this is why moms tend to really let themselves go by the wayside when it comes to caring for themselves, because that programming takes over. And the guilt of wanting to be everything, because we're achievers before our children come around, right? Of being everything we need to be to patients and to colleagues and to those watching us, does not die with us. We that's how we are as people. But then you become a mom, and that's where these focuses on being creative and looking at new ways to balance what gives us now, what will fill us up, is really important. And I think this day and age, there's a lot more opportunities that are coming to fruition, specifically after the pandemic. There's so many people, not just in the healthcare industry, who have chosen left turns in life to create new paths for themselves, to say, I want to enjoy my life. I want to enjoy what I do every day. I don't want to feel like a machine. I want to create. I want to feel filled up. I want to feel fulfilled. And that also is another piece of that, another degree of that, is when you become a parent. And what you just said about, with your daughter, missing a lot of time with her, that was the catalyst for me.
Okay.
That was the catalyst, because we have one child, and she is our heart. And it's tough. Being a parent, being a mother is the most impossible love, right? You love this child, and when you're not with them, you miss them so much. And when you're with them, you're like, I need to feel like myself again. And becoming a mother is becoming a new person. It's like becoming a 2.0 version of yourself, entering a new season, not only learning a child, but learning, how do I now look? How do I now function? What are the things I'm keeping from the 1.0 version of myself and bringing into 2.0? But also, how do I reinvent this? And as a practitioner, as a pharmacist, who is a working parent, I think that also is up for molding and manipulation. And for me, I was missing out on so much time with my daughter. Everything you just said, I was there for when they're very young and they're going to bed very early. I was there for feeding time, bath time, that's it. And then gone before she got up the next morning. And luckily my husband works from home. And so she was in daycare from 6 weeks old also, but he had more flexibility to spend those moments with her. And I knew that would be something that I wouldn't get back. But looking forward, I didn't want to feel that guilt 15 years down the road. I didn't want it still lingering. So what I decided to do is kind of look at a more creative way of, how do I still create income and continue to build my career, which is where admin allowed me to have more flexibility to see her in the mornings. And from there, I never set out to create a company. It was more of this exploratory purpose, of creating skincare, but it made sense to me because of the chemistry of it all. And this brand evolved from this creative piece I felt like I lost when I was 4. Math and science comes very easy to people that choose to go into pharmacy 9 times out of 10. And I had honed that skill for 13 years at this point. But all that creativity that we have as children, I felt like I'd put that on halt around 4 or 5, and creating a skincare company opened it back up for me. And by doing that, and almost like reverting to this childlike creativity I had not tapped into for so long, opened up this now flexibility that I get to choose the moments that I am not going to miss out with her. And ultimately, that's what you're able to do, with your podcast and things like that. And you just never know what's coming. And I think it's being in a sense of saying yes, of being open to things looking different, but using your skill sets. And always being in this place of yes is so important, because you never know what door it's going to open. And then having that flexibility now to look back and spend time with her. If I still only got to see her for bath time and dinner time, I would be brokenhearted every day.
Yeah.
And I sympathize so much with working moms because of this. I think single working moms deserve unbelievable gratitude and an award every day. But I think the gratitude that I now have for being able to be creative and mold what this now looks like as a mom and as a pharmacist, or, as a business owner, is really important to women, for women to know. Never say never, and always be at a place of yes, because you can create new ways to give yourself that life that you want without feeling like you are really sacrificing a piece of yourself every single day.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting topic of conversation, but I think a really valuable one that a lot of mums and dads need to discuss openly. It's something that we don't really talk about very often publicly. People are always kind of expected to, I guess, be grinding.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all been there. Even, I guess, when you started your company, you were working full time, and I know that you were working till 1, 2 in the morning,
Oh,
kind of developing products and kind of doing your shipping and your administration.
mm-hmm.
Tell us about the start of your journey as an entrepreneur and a business owner.
Oh, wow. I could cry thinking about this, from exhaustion and also pride. Um, so I remember very vividly, I was 38 at the time, and I had never really done anything with my skin other than wash my face and maybe put a moisturizer on. And I was 38, and I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh, I must need to start to pay attention to my skin now. I was a sun worshiper my whole life. I'm from the South. We tend to be in the sun a lot. And I bought a very expensive antioxidant serum, a vitamin C serum, and I turned on the back and looked at it, just the chemistry nerd that I am, and was really kind of looking deeper into these ingredients. And I didn't see the ingredient that was touted that I was buying. I saw like an ester version because of chemistry knowledge. But long story short, I went to Google and I just started down a rabbit hole of ingredients. And really what happened along that journey was introducing myself to concepts that made complete sense to me because of what our medical background and all of the schooling and expertise that we have gain along the way. But really what was happening is I was opening up that creative box that I put away, like I was mentioning earlier. And I basically thought to myself, this is just how I am. I can make this. This is not hard. And I did some calculations for this one vitamin C serum that I wanted to create. I understood the ingredients that were compatible. I knew what concentrations I needed. And I bought all of these ingredients and a little cute scale, and did a little DIY vitamin C serum at my kitchen counter. I told no one about it. And I started to put this vitamin C serum on my skin. And about 2 weeks or so, I had some girlfriends ask me, what are you doing to your skin? It looks great. And I said, I'm making a bootleg vitamin C serum. And they said, would you make us some? And I was like, sure, no big deal. And along that kind of moment in time, I had taught myself a little bit more about certain essential fatty acids for our skin health. And ultimately my perspective and my mission with my company was and still is to improve the health of our skin, which is our largest organ. So the pharmacist in me just does not die along the way. And so I did this for a couple of months. I would make things for some people. Again, never intended to create a company. And it was more of just really loving to tinker, loving to be a little mad scientist in my home. I never saw it really going further than that. And I was enjoying it, and I was enjoying the research. It was stepping outside of, at that point, admin type of decision making, and it was playing and feeling and texture and touch and smell and active ingredients and efficacious, kind of activity of things. And then I went and I had a girls' night with some of the girls that I had been making things for, and we had copious amounts of wine. And they told me, you have some really good things here. Have you ever considered creating a company? And I had not. And long story short, I ended up creating a company. And Imogene & Co. was born. And Imogene is my grandmother. She was a woman that could make something beautiful out of nothing. And it is my middle name and my daughter's middle name. So it's very much a pay homage to my heritage in that way. But I also grew up on a really large family farm, and having my hands in the dirt and understanding ingredients from a natural perspective was important to me. So even though I'm a pharmacist and I can speak to everything synthetic, I chose to focus on only natural ingredients as I built my company. And everything, it's everything from a medical grade serum to a body oil, but ultimately it's a natural or naturally derived ingredient. So as the company started to grow, it was small. I did not have a website. I was doing no marketing. It was social media and a Squarespace. I would invoice people, and any entrepreneur understands that it always starts with friends and family because they love you and support you. And you have to have a good product, no matter what that product is. And being in a hospital, a lot of times those friends were going to be healthcare professionals, and they understood these ingredients, they understood chemistry, and they would really like to know the educational pieces of that. And that's where I really love to kind of focus. So at the end of a year of word of mouth growth, mad scientist activity at my house, I would work all day as a clinical manager, and I would come home, throw my stuff down by the door. God bless my husband, because during that year he was doing the cooking and the bathing and everything, because our daughter was maybe around 18 months. I was building a company from my dining room table and my kitchen table. And I will always be grateful for those memories. And I hope I never lose those memories, because it was everything from hand labeling bottles to heat sealing bottles to filling bottles with syringes until about 2 to 3 a.m. every single morning. It was like having a newborn for an entire year who doesn't sleep. And then I would go to bed. I'd get up at 7 o'clock and I would go back to the hospital all day. And ultimately what was fueling me was this new creativity and adrenaline, but also dipping my toe into something where I felt confident enough because of the expertise and the experience I had of, chemistry, but also this newfound passion and crash course in business that I really was giving myself. And that fueled me for a year. And I sat with my accountant after a year and kind of looked at everything that happened and asked when I could go part-time at the hospital, because I thought long and hard about what I really wanted to do with this company. Was it something I wanted to grow? Was it something I wanted to leave my daughter one day, which is a very long game to play? Is it something that I wanted to kind of keep in this little bubble and just not really allow it to grow into anything and let it be a side hobby? And what I decided is that I really was passionate about what I was creating, because now I was giving back to people in a very different sense than I used to give back to them in a hospital. But ultimately it all overlaps and kind of integrates, because you want to better people. And with the mission of my company being to improve the health of their skin, a lot of times the time I take with customers now is the education of understanding certain products and why they would improve the health of their skin. So when you heard my podcast with Tim, I was probably 4 to 5 months before I chose to go part-time and step out of a management role and go back to my home hospital where I was the neurospecialist, where I now see patients. I kind of see all patients really, whatever patients they need me to see, part-time. But I had not yet stepped into where I am now. And after a full year, my husband had enough of everything being in the house. I mean, it was audacious. It was out of control. And so I remember being between meetings at my hospital, management meetings, and I was looking for a space to buy or a commercial space to lease, but nothing really felt that. My intuition was not saying, yes, this is where you're about to spend money and put money into growing a dream into an actual, company. Nothing was really firing for me. And I think that's important for people to know, not just women, but your intuition is one of the biggest gifts that we're given, whether that's as a mother, as a practitioner, or a pharmacist, or just as a person. And my intuition was not saying yes to anything. And so I was between meetings and I got on the computer, and we have a database that you can look for property. And I set about a 30-mile radius from my house of property search. And the property I'm in right now popped up. And it was 21 acres, which is a pretty large property. And there was a warehouse on it, and I had no idea what it looked like inside. And my intuition just went off. I was like, you need to see this. And my husband is from Boston, so he's from the city and I'm from the country. And he was like, I don't understand why you need to go see this. And I was like, I don't know either, but I do. So we came to see it, and it was a dream. And it was exactly what I was meant to find. And I purchased the property, had a heart attack for about 2 months of doing that. And I had started with 2 employees that were helping me either out of my home or out of their homes. They were both pharmacy technicians. One of them was a chemotherapy pharmacy technician I'd worked with. And they believed in my dream. They believed in me, and they would help me along the way. They are still employees of mine. And what happened after the growth into an actual a separate entity, a separate building, was taking the risks that you've always been scared to take, but your intuition tells you to do them. And they served me well. And so I now have, that was, let's see, January of 2020 was when I started the company for my home. And now, we're in June of 2022, and we have been in our property, in our warehouse for a year and 4 months about. And now I have a team of 10 women. And we do everythhy under one roof. We are a full self-sustaining business, which is very important this day and age in kind of anything that's a product-based market, but specifically for skincare, that I get to control inventory, quality of ingredients, our manufacturing processes, and ultimately everything in pharmacy that you learn in a hospital with lot numbering and your sterility and sterile field, and your management of your inventory. That all plays into our day-to-day practices here. And so now the company grew into, we're about 85% direct to consumer, which means online purchasing, and 15% wholesale. And yeah, we thrive and love our days. We get to blare our music and dance and laugh. And I have women that believe in Imogene & Co. and believe in me and love the flexibility of knowing that they can bring their kids here, for a couple of hours or whatever they need that day if they didn't have a babysitter, or, they can come at a more flexible time frame that works around them, and we can leave and go grab lunch and then come back, and we're ultimately creating beautiful things for people to feel confident about themselves. So it's a beautiful story. I'm kind of giving the nuts and bolts because it would take so long, but I'm proud of it. I am protective of it. I am in love with it, and I respect it because it grew from a place of passion that I never saw coming, but ultimately it came from experience of choosing to not go to vet school and go to pharmacy school and learn everything logistics wise of a chemistry kind of background, and then serve that into being a pharmacist that takes care of people, that focuses on self-discipline, that focuses on crazy schedules and crazy decision making that you have to do in a hospital, to ultimately management and managing people and administrative problem solving and inventory management, to now running a business and kind of putting it all together.
I absolutely love that story. It's really inspirational. It's beautiful. It's a 360,
Yeah.
in terms of what you've been able to achieve. And I'm absolutely delighted that you love it so much
Thank
and
you.
that you're getting so much joy. And you found that through, a lot of hard work,
A
a
lot.
lot of dedication. But, ultimately it's given you the balance that you need in life, but it's also given you a lot of joy. And it must be wonderful to bring your daughter with you to the warehouse sometimes when you're working so she can see you in action. My daughter, I brought her to work with me in the pharmacy a couple of times, and she wants to be a pharmacist. She's absolutely adamant that we're going to work together when she's grown up.
That
And
makes
though
me so happy. Oh my God.
she loves it and she's absolutely crazy, and there's so many things that she enjoys, and I say to her, oh, you're really good at this, maybe this is something that you could consider as a job, like when you're older. She's like, no mummy, how many times have I told you, like, I'm going to be a pharmacist, but we are going to work together. And she's 4 and it's so cute. And I hope she doesn't change her mind because that would be wonderful. But of course, anything can happen between now and when she's grown up. But I love that she's so passionate about sharing like my job with me. And it feels like, even though it's frustrating, I have guilt and I've missed opportunities in parenting that I sometimes feel sad about, I'm role modeling the way, as a parent and as a professional, and she's seeing some really good things that are coming out of me as a full-time employee. With
Ugh,
podcasting, she actually loves to podcast with us because my husband has one as well. So we always have like a little studio set up, and she loves recording herself and recording with me. And she's like, welcome to the family podcast. And she like has her own show, has different topics. And it's so nice to see that creative side of her, which she gets to share with us. And even though it's a hobby for me at the moment, it's really wonderful to share it with her, as a mother, and teach her skills as well at the same time. Because, like you say, you're being really creative and you've now like released that creativity in you from when you were a child, and it was kind of blocked by a lot of math and science. And now you can share that journey and have your daughter be part of that journey, which is really nice. And I can see parts of my life which are similar to you from that perspective. I'm really conscious of time. And I just want to ask you one thing really before we end the podcast is, I feel like it's really hard to work in a clinical role for so many years and kind of be um, drilled into you that you're in a patient facing role, and you kind of work your way into a clinical specialty to then becoming a business owner. Like, what, there are lots of pharmacists that I know that kind of would like to pursue a creative kind of entrepreneurial role, but they're afraid to some extent, about that transition period. They're afraid of whether or not it's going to sustain like a lifestyle or an income that will support themselves or their families. Like, what advice would you give yourself? Because you've obviously been through that process and you've come through and managed to cut down from 5 days a week now to a couple of days. What advice would you go back and give yourself to, I guess, push yourself to get to the point where you are now?
I would say there's 2 things that come to mind, that I can touch on briefly. And then there's something I do want to tell you that's so important that came up as you were talking about your daughter. The 2 things I think that if I look back that are really important in my story that started out of kind of that transition is number one, make a plan. To choose to step outside of your career path, especially when it's not a job, it's a career. You went and got a doctorate. You put time, blood, sweat, tears, and money into that doctorate. Really identifying the reason why you want to step outside and being fully grounded in that reason, to not ever be shaken from that reason, but also to know the plan of what it looks like, what your ultimate goal is with the change. That's really important, because if you can't ever come back to that grounded reason, you'll flail to something else. Because there's a lot of hard work that goes into reinventing yourself, especially in a career path. And you have to be very steadfast in knowing why and making the plan as to what the long-term goal is. The next for me is to surround yourself with people that have gone where you're wanting to go.
Okay.
Now, for me, let's say in a skincare space, also, it really started more in this business space, is business coaches are absolutely they are worth every cent, especially a strong business coach that is in the niche of where you're wanting to go. They walk the walk and talk the talk. And I would say with a business coach, it's really helping you to hone and stay focused as you are stepping into a brand new world, but also surrounding yourself with people that have been there. So this would be small business owners. Like for me, who I chose to really focus on was building relationships with small business owners. I'm listening to podcasts, really wonderful product-based, business-focused podcasts. There's several out there, and they were just unbelievably helpful for me to think about things that I hadn't thought about. Then to do your homework of these subject matters that come up that you need to think about before you pull the trigger on stepping into new podcasting, new business ideas, things like that. It's really building your new circle that will help to support you, because it can be a lonely world when you make a choice to transition out, because you've already built your family and relationships in a certain space, right? Like we have built our time with our pharmacist, with our colleagues, and to choose to build a new family. And if you're doing it alone, you have to build the right people around you that are trustworthy, trusting your intuition in that have already made decisions so they can show you where they might have stumbled and tell you what is unbelievably helpful information, but also the things not to worry your time and efforts on. So I think building your network is extremely important. Business coaching is very important, but identifying what your goals are before you ever step out that gate. Those are some pieces of advice I would have. And then also one thing I want to say to you that is so beautiful when you speak about your daughter, and I feel it so deep, the time that you feel like you missed with her, especially because the focus now is that you have another baby coming, and we always want to keep improving ourselves, whether that's a parent, whether that's as a person, as a pharmacist. And there's things that you want to do different with your next baby. Someone told me once when I was really struggling with the time I was missing with Parker, my daughter, because I did not step into, a part-time position until she was 16, 18 months old, I believe. So that's almost 2 years of really punishing myself with guilt of what I was missing. I had someone tell me, and it was a very genuine conversation. It wasn't just to make me feel better. It was a genuine conversation that they said two things. Do not feel bad that your daughter has been in daycare since she was a child, like very young, because the minute that she walks into kindergarten that we're about to do, she's going to walk in confident, prepared, and not scared out of her mind and traumatized because she doesn't know a brand new world for her. And I was like, oh, that makes me feel better in the moment. The other thing is that for you to be a strong, working woman and mother and wife, you are already modeling and mirroring things for her that you might know, but you don't know. Subconsciously, you're teaching her to be well-rounded, strong, independent, knowing that she can do more than one thing, and she sees it through you and all of your actions. And ultimately, kids and people, and we all are built for connection, right? Your daughter now is aware of connection with you. 4 is such a precious age. It was one of my favorite ages. She now wants to connect with you, and she can communicate that, right? By doing things like setting up a family podcast and wanting to be a pharmacist. And it's such sweet moments that I think that you are at the right place at the right time, and she is too, to really appreciate that and let go of the guilt, because you are showing her so much strength and so much capability as a woman. And I think it's important for any working moms to know that that is a very invaluable gift that you give your children.
Absolutely. And I love that. And it's a great kind of way to, I guess, bring a 360 to this episode, really, because we've talked a lot about the grind, working hard, but also seeing the good in that, and, understanding where it kind of comes from, but what it can also lead to in terms of when you do get to that point where flexibility becomes really valuable. And I truly believe in what you say as well, is that you're role modeling the way. You're giving her, a lot of opportunity to see that you can multitask, like you say. And Lily went to school and on her first day didn't even turn around. She's like, bye, see you later, mama.
And it's
And
like
that
our mama
confidence,
hearts hurts, but you've instilled confidence in
yeah,
her.
the confidence in going to daycare actually has been a game changer. She is an independent child. She's 4 years old. She gets up in the morning. She brushes her teeth. She washes her face. She has school uniform on and then comes downstairs. She is, yeah, incredible for a 4-year-old. And there's no way she would have had that independence if she was home with me all the time.
She's going to be a
So,
force to be reckoned with one day. And
yeah, let's
that's
hope
so
so.
wonderful. That's so wonderful.
Yeah. I want to thank you, honestly, for your time, your energy on this podcast, for connecting with me on email without knowing who I am, and immediately saying yes to, having this conversation. And I look forward to seeing what happens with Emma-Jean and Co. and, the further development that you have as a mother, as an entrepreneur, as a businesswoman. So I'm hoping that we can keep in touch long term so that we can continue our conversations.
I would love that. The honor's mine, Anisha. Thank you so much. And good luck to you on the birth of your next child. I'm so excited for you. You're going to be wonderful.
Thank you.